Imagine this. You stumble upon a cabin deep in the woods. The air is heavy. No birds, no wind, just silence. Then a door creaks open, and inside you see eyes staring back at you, eyes that do not blink like yours, eyes that carry centuries of secrets you were never meant to see. This is not folklore. This is not myth. This is the story of a family hidden in the mountains of West Virginia, a family whose very existence whispers of forbidden bloodlines and the cost of breaking natural law. The Whittakers are spoken of like a ghost story. The locals warn travelers do not wander too far up the dirt path past odd West Virginia, because you might hear the sound of growls instead of words coming from human mouths. Some laugh, some dismiss, but those who know fall silent. They know what happens when generations of blood fold in on themselves, when the family tree becomes not a tree, but a circle. But this story is not only about one family. This is about the shadow of history repeating itself. Across time, kings and pharaohs bred within their own lines, believing purity would give them divine power. What it gave them instead was weakness, deformity, madness. Yet the pattern never died because the urge for control is older than civilization. The Whittakers became a mirror not of royalty, but of the hidden truth that humanity has always been manipulated into believing. Purity lies in closing bloodlines rather than expanding them. Ask yourself who decided that families like this must remain in the shadows. Why are we only allowed to see them when a documentary maker drags them into the light? Is it pity, exploitation, or is it a reminder of something far darker, that the systems we call civilization have always experimented with human lives in silence? The story of the Whittakers is not an accident. It is a clue, a fragment of a larger design, one that ties into royal courts, religious dynasties, secret societies, and the silent rulers of empires. What you are about to hear is not just about one family. It is about a hidden operating system that has always been in control, a system that uses bloodlines like chains. And tonight I am going to show you how deep that chain goes. You must understand the land itself before you can understand the family. The Appalachian Mountains hold stories older than the United States, older than the settlers who cut through its forests, and older than the maps that try to tame it. The land is a vault, and inside it lie secrets meant to stay buried. But some families never left. They clung to the isolation as if it was their only protector. The Whittakers were one of those families hidden in a forgotten village of West Virginia. Their world was not shaped by schools or cities or culture. Their world was dirt roads, collapsing porches, rotting wood, and the deep silence of mountains pressing in on all sides. No outsiders came in, no insiders ever left, and when a community becomes that closed, it does not take long for blood to circle back into itself. Generations passed like a repeating ritual. Brothers and sisters marrying cousins, uncles uniting with nieces, a cycle forming where there was no escape. What emerged from that cycle was not just physical deformity, but psychological echoes. Grunts replacing language, barking replacing thought, expressions frozen in half human, half-animal mannerisms, as if the body itself rebelled against the prison of its own blood. But here is where the shadow grows even darker, because when you look at families like this through the lens of history, you see a pattern of experiments. Hidden rural towns, secret medical projects, strange government attention that suddenly appears and vanishes. Why? Because families like this expose the fragility of human design, and those in power study them quietly. They document, they observe, but they never intervene. Ask yourself this: what kind of system allows a family to collapse into this state, yet steps in only when cameras arrive? Could it be that the Whittakers are not an accident, but an unspoken reminder, a controlled case study of what happens when the chains of blood are not broken? And if so, who benefits from keeping such families hidden until the right moment to expose them? The Whittakers are not only victims of isolation, they are evidence. Evidence that human beings can be molded, warped, and reshaped through cycles of control. Evidence that society does not protect the weak, but uses them as mirrors to remind the strong of what power really looks like. And as the world laughs at their growls and stares at their silence, someone in the shadows is still taking notes. Every family has roots, but the roots of the Whittakers grow not outward into the world, but inward into themselves. Imagine a tree that bends back toward its own trunk, twisting and choking its branches until growth becomes a cycle of decay. That is what their bloodline became, a loop with no escape. The earliest whispers of the family trace back to the late 19th century, a time when West Virginia's coal towns rose and fell like shadows. The Whittakers settled in a hollow forgotten by the industry. Too poor to leave, too proud to mix with outsiders, they clung to the land as if it was their only inheritance. But the land demanded a price. Isolation. Isolation that soon demanded something even more dangerous. Generation after generation, the choices narrowed. Marriage within kin was not simply habit, it became necessity. The mountain roads were too far, the nearest towns too suspicious. Outsiders did not enter, and insiders did not leave. So the bloodline folded in on itself like a secret. The children who came after carried the marks. Some were silent, unable to form words. Others barked and growled, their communication reduced to animal sound. Some stared with wild eyes, unable to tether thought to speech, and all of them carried the same haunted look as if the past itself was living through them. But here is the question that no one wants to ask. Was this only the result of inbreeding, or was there more to the story? Whispers in West Virginia speak of strange visitors in the mid-20th century, men with notebooks and cameras who entered the hollows in plain black cars. They did not bring help, they brought questions. They did not heal, they only observed. What were they searching for? Perhaps the Whittakers were not merely a family, but a living experiment. The mountains have long been used as testing grounds for ideas never meant for the public. Families like this one left to collapse may have Ovided the perfect theater for hidden agendas. Study what happens when bloodlines are forced inward. Study what happens when human communication unravels. Study what happens when society looks away. To this day, neighbors claim they hear sounds in the night, not just barking, but guttural cries that echo through the hollows, sounds that remind them of the Whittakers and what generations of silence can create. The family became both legend and warning, whispered from one household to another. Do not go too far into the valley. Do not wander near their home. Because in the mountains, some bloodlines are not just families, they are prisons. The deeper you look into the Whittakers, the stranger the picture becomes. Outsiders often imagine inbreeding as a simple explanation. But reality inside that hollow tells a darker story. The family was not only trapped by blood, they were trapped by silence. Silence thicker than the forest that surrounded their broken home. Imagine children growing up in a place where words are rare, where a grunt replaces a sentence and a bark replaces a cry for help. That silence did not come naturally. It was inherited like a curse passed down through generations. Every child born into the hollow stepped into a world already shaped by the weight of the past. Their communication broke down, their minds fractured, their bodies carried the visible signs of what the mountains demanded, but silence also hides secrets. And the Whittaker family's silence has shielded something that outsiders have always sensed but never named. The land itself feels cursed. Locals say when you pass their house, the air grows heavy, the birds fall quiet, the wind carries an unnatural echo. People swear that their dogs refuse to go near the property, as if animals sensed something that humans ignored. The photographs that later emerged shocked the world. But what the pictures did not show was worse: the smell of decay that hung around the property, the piles of junk that seemed less like trash and more like barriers, as if the family was fortifying themselves against unseen eyes, the way their eyes darted toward strangers with both fear and recognition, as if they had seen intruders before. And who were those intruders? In hushed conversations, old residents recall government men who visited in the 60s. They wore clean suits but carried no compassion. They did not bring food or help. They brought clipboards and questions. Some claim they even took samples. Hair blood, whispers, say even more, and then they left, leaving the family in the SS, a prison of isolation, only now marked with curiosity from the outside world. So we must ask, were the Whittakers victims only of their own choices, or were they pawns in a larger game, a hidden study of degeneration, a case left to fester so it could be documented? Whichever the answer, the truth is chilling. The family did not simply survive in isolation. They were left there like ghosts for the world to eventually discover. And the silence that once shielded them has become the loudest scream. As years passed, the Whittakers became something more than a family. They became a spectacle. Outsiders whispered their name in small towns, and journalists came hunting for proof. Cameras pushed into their broken lives, and suddenly their private world was dragged into the light. What had been hidden for generations was now entertainment for the curious and horror for the rest. When the first images spread across the internet, people stared in disbelief. The expressions, the twisted movements, the sounds that seemed more animal than human. To most it was a nightmare brought to life. To the Whittakers it was simply existence. They did not see themselves as monsters. They were just living the only way they had ever known. But the world judged them through cold screens and mocking voices. The attention brought money and donations, but also shame. Neighbors kept their distance. Rumors grew about curses, about demonic forces, about punishments from God. What outsiders did not understand was that the family had been trapped long before the cameras arrived. The poverty, the isolation, and the stigma were chains tighter than any iron shackles. And once the world saw them, those chains only grew heavier. Look closely at the interviews, and you can see it in their eyes. Confusion mixed with fear, a silent question. Why are you here? What do you want from us? They never asked for fame. They never asked to become the face of inbreeding in America. Yet their suffering was turned into a label, a dark brand that would follow them forever. But there is a deeper cruelty in all of this. Because when you strip away the spectacle, you find human beings, children who once played in the dirt before they grew into haunted adults. Parents who only wanted family without understanding the price they would pay. And in that moment, the Whittakers stop being a legend of horror and become what they truly are, victims of a cycle that no on. Broke victims of a system that left them alone. The tragedy of the Whittakers is not simply in their bloodline. It is in the way society abandoned them and then returned only to exploit their pain. Their story is not just about genetics. It is about neglect, about how isolation can twist the mind and soul, and about how curiosity can sometimes be more cruel than silence. The whispers about the Whittakers began to spread far beyond West Virginia. People on the internet made them into a myth, a cursed bloodline spoken about in hushed tones, yet forums filled with speculation. Were they the result of centuries of inbreeding? Were they victims of a hidden experiment? Or were they simply the forgotten children of America left behind in the shadows? As curiosity grew, researchers, historians, and thrill-seekers all tried to uncover the truth. But the truth is not easy to face, because when you trace the roots of the Whittakers, you do not just find one family. You find an entire history of poverty, of isolation, of mountains that cut people off from the outside world. Generations of families marrying within their own circles because there were no roads, no schools, no escape. This was not just a choice, it was survival in a land that time forgot. The family became a symbol. But symbols are dangerous because once society brands you with a story, you no longer own your identity. The Whittakers were called freaks, monsters, demons. Yet those labels hide the real horror. The real horror is that a whole community could be erased from progress, left to rot while the world moved on. They were not cursed, they were abandoned, and in that abandonment their bloodline twisted into something people could no longer understand. But instead of compassion, the world brought cameras instead of help. It brought mockery. Instead of doctors, it brought interviewers asking questions that pierced old wounds. Their suffering was never treated as tragedy. It was consumed as entertainment. Imagine being born into a family where your last name alone is a prison, where your face, your voice, your very being becomes a headline, a cautionary tale told by strangers who will never know your pain. That is the burden the Whittakers carry. They did not write their own story. They were written into it by the silence of the outside world. And this silence is perhaps the darkest truth of all, because it shows us how easily society looks away until suffering becomes a spectacle, until forgotten people become legends, until human beings become monsters in the eyes of those who never had to live their nightmare. When you hear the name Whittaker, it is easy to think of a family cursed or broken, a family reduced to grunts and stares, a family trapped in the cruel cycle of inbreeding. But behind every headline, behind every viral video, there is something far more chilling and far more human. The Whittakers are not just a story about isolation, they are a mirror. A mirror showing what happens when poverty stretches across generations, when opportunity never arrives, when entire towns are forgotten by the modern world. They did not choose this fate, they inherited it, and the silence of the world around them carved that inheritance into stone. Think about it. If you were born in those mountains, if your family had no access to schools, no way to leave, no connection to the world beyond the hills, would your life be any different? Could you be sure that your story would not become just another tragedy, whispered in documentaries and passed around on the internet? The Whittaker story forces us to confront a truth that many would rather ignore. We create monsters by abandoning people. We turn human beings into spectacles when we should have given them compassion. They were not cursed, they were victims. Victims of geography, of history, of silence. And yet there is still something haunting here, something that lingers. The Whittakers are alive right now, still in those mountains, still carrying the weight of their name, still standing as proof of what happens when society chooses to look away. We call it a dark story. We call it disturbing. But the darkest part is not their existence. The darkest part is our own role in creating them. So the next time you hear their name, do not just think of inbreeding. Do not just think of strangeness or shock. Instead, remember that the true horror is abandonment, the true curse is neglect, and the tragedy of the Whittakers is not just theirs, it belongs to us all.